What's going on, guys? Billy here, and the new Mini 2 has been perceived really well by people that picked this drone up, and it's rightfully so because DJI addressed almost every single issue that was present in the Mini 1, and they've made a lot of great software enhancements that overall improve the usability of the Mini 2. Now, amongst all of those changes, seemingly for the better, there's one that stands out that actually may have created a problem that wasn't present in that original Mini 1. The issue that I'm referring to is the gimbal kick that people are experiencing and that I have experienced plenty of times when flying this drone, primarily in high winds and especially when I'm cruising around in sport mode. I know a lot of people will comment down below saying that they hope that it can be fixed in a future firmware update, but I'm afraid that this is an issue that is mainly hardware and design based, not firmware based. So before I start yelling fire here and going into some of the issues I've experienced with the Mini 2, I just want to point out that I don't think this is a defect in the drone itself, in the Mini 2 itself, but I think it has to do with the design of such a small drone, a drone that DJI really wants to make sure weighs under 250 grams, and of course that's going to lead to some design limitations. So in order to understand why we're experiencing this gimbal issue and this gimbal kick in the Mini 2, we've got to take a look at the camera and gimbal assembly of not only the Mini 2 but some of DJI's other drones. Let's throw things all the way back to the design of the Phantom series. While it might not be ideal for traveling, the gimbal had so much range to move up and down freely with no visual obstructions to the gimbal. You could consider the props in the shot as a visual obstacle, but regardless, the gimbal was able to move freely without restrictions up and down. Now, as people wanted more portable drones, DJI answered the call with the folding Mavic Pro. With all the game-changing innovations that this new design brought to the market, one of the problems that was answered through this design was the elimination of props in the shot. Maybe they would find their way into the frame on a rare occasion, but this was a much welcome change from how often it happened with the Phantom drones. Here's the catch though. When flying at high speeds or tackling a heavy gust of wind, the drone would instantly pitch its gimbal downwards to compensate for the tilt of the aircraft moving forward. If it stayed at a perfect 0 degrees, the top part of the drone would enter the frame. This screen recording here taken from the newer Mavic 2 Pro shows that very thing happening as I'm unable to bring the gimbal level to the horizon at this top speed in sport mode. I find this to be so problematic because if I'm flying, say, the Mavic 2 Pro here and I'm chasing after a fast moving subject, whether that be a jet ski, a boat, a car, a train, anything, and I want to get down on their level and chase after them, well, I can't go in my top speed in sport mode because the camera is going to kick downwards because of the forward pitch of the drone. It's just not going to work. I can't keep that gimbal level at 0 degrees. Now, let's say you're not into chasing subjects, you just want to shoot the sunset and you're chasing after that sunset, you're flying directly towards it. Well, you can't do it in the maximum speed in sport mode because the gimbal won't stay level at 0 degrees and it's going to kick downwards and look at the ground. It's kind of annoying. So to give you guys a better understanding and explanation of why this happens on the Mavic series of drones, it's because of the way the gimbal sits underneath of the top part of the body. Perhaps the worst design that we've seen is in the original Mavic Air. Sure, it's got a lot of protection around the top and on the side, so if it were to crash, the gimbal would be less likely to suffer any damage, but look at how recessed the full assembly is. It's so close to the top that as the aircraft pitches forward further to compensate for the faster speed, the gimbal needs to correct itself by looking down to not get the frame of the drone in the top portion of the shot. Now, if we fast forward about 2 years, the new generation of the Mavic Air, the Mavic Air 2, has got the best gimbal design by far out of all of the Mavic drones that we've seen to date. It sits at a perfect spot under the drone, so it's far enough away from the top of the body to avoid any visual obstructions. You can tell by looking at a screen recording pushing full throttle forward, even as we hit that max speed of 42 miles an hour, there is no sign of the gimbal shooting downwards, and that is the reason why right now, the Mavic Air 2 is my absolute favorite drone to shoot video with. Now, to bring the focus of this video back to the Mini 2, everything I just mentioned about the design of the gimbals and other DJI drones translates perfectly into the Mini 2. In fact, the Mini 2 faces challenges of its own because DJI is so hell-bent on getting this drone under 250 grams for specific reasons and in terms of like registering this drone and all that stuff. But regardless, they wanted to keep this drone under 250 grams. It actually weighs 242 grams. And because of that weight, they couldn't extend the gimbal any further, which means that we're now left with a drone that as it pitches further forward, the camera is going to have to compensate downwards as to not get the top of the body in the frame of the shot. This is why when I'm flying with this drone and I want to take advantage of the top speed of 36 miles an hour, I try to fly the drone sideways so that the body moves left to right instead of straight over the camera or even backwards so the gimbal can move freely with no obstructions of the body itself. I think the reason people are so upset about this issue is because the original Mini 1 didn't have this same issue, at least it wasn't as prevalent. I really only saw it when I initially took off in sport mode. The gimbal would kick down and then I was able to bring it back to 0 degrees, but also take a look down at my top speed in the bottom left corner. I think I only got to like 16 or 18 miles an hour, so I wasn't able to reach the full 31 miles an hour because the wind was just too strong. This drone's motors couldn't handle it. Speaking of those motors, that is by far the biggest hardware upgrade that we got here on the Mini 2, these brand new motors. It allows us to get 5 extra miles an hour on our top speed on the Mini 2, so we've now got 36 miles an hour opposed to 31 miles an hour, and we've also got a higher wind resistance rating at a scale 5, which allows us to fly in winds of gusts up to 23.5 miles an hour. Now, with what we know about the stronger motors, take this into consideration. The original Mini and the Mini 2 share the same exact gimbal design. There are very little design differences in these drones, and that's evident in the gimbal and camera because they are exactly the same. So if we take both of these factors into consideration, the stronger motors mixed with the same exact gimbal design, then I think we just found our culprit as to why this drone's camera and gimbal are kicking down, especially when we're flying at faster speeds in sport mode. You can imagine that with this drone having the same exact gimbal design, but these stronger motors to propel it faster forward and deal with the stronger winds, you're gonna have a steeper pitch angle in every single direction, especially when you're flying 36 miles an hour in sport mode. The drone is going to be pitching forwards further, and then the camera is going to kick down in order to compensate. Now, I can say this is not confirmed by DJI. DJI didn't come out with a public statement. This is just me using rational thinking to understand why we have this problem on the Mini 2, and unfortunately, it's just a design thing. Like I said in the beginning, they're not going to be able to issue some magical firmware update that totally fixes the gimbal kick issue because it comes down to the design. And don't think it's restricted to the Mini 2. I proved in this video even their higher end Mavic drone, the Mavic 2 Pro, deals with the same issue. And it's because the Mavic Air 2 is so new and such a relatively upgraded drone that we see the gimbal having such a better range of motion. And I think it's just a matter of time when we see a redesign of all of these drones that DJI is going to take into consideration the range of motion of the gimbal. They're going to take it into consideration a lot more. So I can't wait to see the redesign. I know the Mini 2 just came out, but gimbal range and gimbal movement is something that is huge in these drones, and it's led me to use the Mavic Air 2 over the Mavic 2 Pro specifically because of that. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of what I kind of went over in this video regarding the issues surrounding the gimbal of the Mini 2. Let me know your thoughts, and as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.